For whoever is tuning in to listen to or watch this, I am here with Daniel Escott, who is the CEO of Formic AI. Based out of Canada, he is one of our sponsors for our inaugural Future Lawyer Canada, which will take place in Toronto in the week of the 25th of November. Daniel, it is a pleasure to have you join us. Just to kick things off, can you please introduce yourself to our audience and also please tell us a little bit more about what Formic AI does?
Certainly. So my name is Daniel Escott. I am a lawyer here in Toronto. Um, my background is largely in artificial intelligence regulation, working with courts, tribunals, Canadian regulators on creating the rules and guidelines around how people can use AI in the legal environment and in the justice system. Formic AI started about 4 years ago, trying to address the joint issues of explainability and hallucinations with large language models. We've built our solution into what is effectively an enterprise scale AI powered search engine. It essentially offers lawyers the ability to work with confidential or privileged information without accidentally disclosing or doxing any information, while being able to churn through a high volume of data, especially something like a discovery folder or a data room, with exceptional speed, accuracy, and reliability, thanks to our proprietary referencing and citation system.
Thank you for this, Daniel. And can you please tell us where are you currently active as an organization? Are you working in North America predominantly, or are you also working with organizations outside of North America?
So right now, most of our work is based in Canada. We started exploring opportunities in the United States as well. We had some early conversations about expanding over to Australia, Asian nations, and Europe, but those are still early days.
I appreciate that. And when you and I first spoke, I remember that you mentioned that a lot of the work that you conduct is with government agencies, and now you are successfully going into the private sector by engaging with law firms, uh, and 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 it would be kind of interesting to kind of maybe give us a little bit of differentiation between the use cases that you see in law firms. Our audience being primarily law firm, I think it will be useful to understand, what they can expect from your product and what sets Formic AI apart from its competitors in what is an increasingly hot but also competitive market.
Pretty interesting question. So you're right. We basically built our platform from the ground up to be in the strictest level of compliance with government regulations, rules on applications for data governance, data sovereignty, cybersecurity, all that fun stuff. On the private side, we've already started working with law firms in Canada on a couple interesting use cases. But at least when I was in private practice, one of my biggest gripes was how much time we'd have to spend, and especially the time we'd have to write off. That was just spent going through documents, reading documents, looking for information. In something like a trademark litigation file, you'd have to go through every single page of a 250,000 file data room and flag every single page where a Coca-Cola logo shows up. It's time consuming, it's monotonous, and frankly, most of the time spent on these tasks either gets written down or written off. We make all of that seamless. We're not trying to replace lawyers. We're not trying to do legal work. But what we are trying to do is, in a highly secure, highly regulated, and high risk environment like the practice of law, you need a kind of technology that can offer you the power of AI in working with high volumes of unstructured data without the limitations of uploading information to a context window or passing information to an outside network. And these are limitations that most other areas where LLMs are being applied right now either aren't as concerned about or simply don't value as much because it's not as high risk and high secure an environment.
And
the first case, sorry, go ahead.
no, you go on, and I'll have a follow-up question to that.
Sure. So the first use case that everyone seems to start with is I just want to upload 40 years of all of the materials that our firms have worked on so that we can search through everything, find anything that's relevant without actually having to go through 40 years worth of records. The thing that really sets us apart is our referencing algorithm, which we've built in as essentially a proprietary RAG framework so that every paragraph of our modeled response, be that a search results or a conversational response, comes with these hyperlinked footnotes that are non-generative. And all of those footnotes are linked back to the exact source material for that paragraph of its response. Because they're non-generative, those footnotes and their sources can never be hallucinated. It also makes accessing that information, no matter where it is in the database, extremely quick, easy, and intuitive. So even if you're working with a document that was created in the 70s, as long as it's digitized and put into our system, if it comes up in a response, you click the footnote. It doesn't matter how old it is or where it is. That comes in exceptionally handy when you start looking at more nuanced use cases like discovery, due diligence, working with data rooms, even legal research. Because think about something like a data room for an M&A transaction. You're working with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of files, depending on the size of these companies. And some lawyer somewhere is going to have to comb through all of that data, do all of the analysis, flag any risks. And usually they know what they're looking for. They just have to keep looking for it over and over and over again. It would be much easier if you could just tell our model, this is what I'm looking for. Show me every instance in every document where this information comes up. It'll comb through the entire data room. Here's all the places that it came up. Here's why they came up as relevant for your search. And here's a link to every footnote for every place in every document in this entire data room where that information can be found. You don't need to reverse engineer anything. You don't need to take our answer on good faith. It's an LLM that you can trust, but you don't have to.
I'm super curious to also find out that coming from a heavily embedded system into big government institution comes with elevated requirements for cybersecurity, for risk. Does that bring comfort to your law firm customers, which also have similar requirements when they are looking to adopt the system? And perhaps that is somewhat of a limitation for some of the other suppliers on the market.
Frankly, the answer to both is 100% yes. When it comes to where we fit in with government, our biggest innovations when we were evaluated by the federal government, our referencing system and the way that we've integrated it into our own RAG framework is seen as better than state of the art in every respect. It's dramatically reduced our incidence rate of hallucination, which is a huge risk in this area. And the way that it manifests in these citations means that you don't need to have a PhD in computer science to figure out what the model considered, where it found the disinformation. And even if you want to identify any hallucinations that could be in the response, you can just click through all of these footnotes, know that these citations are not generative, so they can't be hallucinated. So this is the original source material no matter what. And that reliability means that we're actually able to position this as a tool that enables you to use AI in ways that AI can add value to your practice without running a risk that because it's in LLMs, you have this black box problem. You won't be able to explain where this came from. We can show you where this information came from. And not only can we show you, we can guarantee that it exists. It is the source material, and we can show you exactly where that is. When you start looking at where that puts us in respect of others in this market, citations aren't new. Everyone's trying this. They're trying to ground their answers into truth as much as they possibly can, either through citations to internet available sources or some sort of agentic process. The problem with taking, I would say, the most common approach right now, which is an agentic search process with citation, is because it's agentic and it's still using an LLM at the end of the day, you still have to upload that information to a context window. You have to search within that window. And every instance in the workflow for that agentic task is a new opportunity to hallucinate, which means it's not just garbage in, garbage out. Your likelihood that the response you're getting from an agentic search that could be hallucinated is much higher than if you were just brute forcing a search through an LLM in the first place. You compound that with the fact that law firms are not working with an insignificant amount of data. Like these are several gigabytes, could be terabytes worth of data for a single transaction. The compute for a traditional LLM to be able to burn through all of that would probably be more expensive than the legal fees from that transaction. At least with the way we've developed our RAG framework, and because we're not uploading any information to a context window, we basically built an AI-powered search that goes around the context window entirely. We don't have that issue. We're not burning millions of dollars on compute to go through a 30 terabyte database. We might burn through a couple thousand, but it's not millions. And the next generation of the technology that we're developing to be able to do this should be able to do that for a couple dollars.
And Daniel, do you see the biggest opportunities for utilization of that technology within complex transactions and litigation? Or are there other segments within the legal practice that this can be particularly useful? What other verticals within those law firms should be considering here?
Truthfully, I think law firms don't realize how much of this work is up for grabs. Because I want to draw a very clear distinction here between work that is done at a law firm, either on the operational side or to support practicing law, but are not practicing law. Even something like legal research, that is not on its own practicing law. Anyone can do legal research as long as they have enough training and understanding of what questions you're looking for, what sources are you pulling from, and a decent research methodology. The practicing component, the part that we cannot replace, is the actual level of judgment, expertise, and experience that lawyers build, both going through law school and when they're in practice themselves, to be able to make decisions and come up with creative arguments for why we should do one thing and not another. Those are decision points that are leveraging that judgment, expertise, and experience. That can never be replaced by any kind of automation, let alone artificial intelligence. But a lot of I'll call busy work, something like going through a data room, creating a production summary, drafting an affidavit of documents, even just going through a discovery folder and summarizing the contents of every single file in a discovery folder. If you have a responsible use of this technology, it can do all of that. It can do it much faster. It can do it much easier. And even if you want to integrate the most strict human-in-a-loop governance framework so that a lawyer is checking every single step of this. The time that they're spending validating this work would still be significantly less than if they were to do it themselves. There's also, I think, a lot of work being done, like I said earlier, on the operational side that isn't legal work at all. You don't see this as often in smaller firms. When you start looking at mid-sized and larger firms, they have a lot of non-legal staff. They have marketing, they have accounting, they have tech, risk compliance. There's a lot of work there that doesn't have the same kind of restrictions as lawyers do in practice. But they have very similar use cases. They're working with similar data sets. They're working with the same problem of high volume data sets that need to be combed through. And even something like managing marketing materials for a law firm, a personal injury law firm spending a ton of money producing and advertising marketing materials for their practice. Being able to put all of that information in a repository where the information is quickly and easily available without needing someone who has a eidetic memory that can comb through all of that very quickly to tell you this is something that you might want to pull from, that becomes invaluable and essentially democratizes access to the information in your database in a way that even something like a complex semantic search would never be able to do.
And Daniel, going back to the product, can you run us through some of the exciting new feature releases on the horizon? What can your users and future users expect? And how would those new features enhance the platform?
So this is my favorite question. There's a couple answers here because we have a lot going on. I'll start with I call it my playground. Formic started around 24 months ago with a beta test of a legal research assistant that's essentially a browser extension. Lawyers and law students, really anyone, can download what we call Candoo, Candoo. And when they're doing legal research on Canly, which is Canada's open access legal research platform, they can use our Candoo browser extension to replace what is effectively an old funky keyword search or an advanced Boolean search at best into more of a semantic search where they can just type into a text box what they're looking for, use our search instead of Canly's to convert that into what we would view as the most accurate advanced Boolean search we could run. That technology then spiraled into using our model to draft legal memos when users are reading cases on Canly. This is where we started testing the referencing algorithm. All we did between jumping from Candoo to our full enterprise platform is we opened up the sources that the model has access to. It's the exact same technology functionally, but the browser extension is limited to you can only read what is on this page on the Canly domain. It won't work for anything else because we told it won't. When we moved that to the enterprise platform, we just removed the Canly limitation and we instead said anything that's been pre-processed and indexed in this enterprise database is fair game. You can use all of that information, but it cannot go outside the four walls of that database. It has no access to the internet. So where we took it then is how do we make using this kind of technology more reliable? And eventually we hit a bit of a plateau. The current approach, even with our referencing algorithm and our RAG framework, we're still at the very last step of our entire process using a large language model to construct the natural language response. We don't even need to use the LLM to do this because we can just produce the raw results from each prompt. But this is at least a nice way to present information and be more responsive to users in a friendly, non-technical way. The question then becomes, how do we remove the LLM entirely? And that's when we get into the fun stuff. We've already built a level of fine-tuned knowledge and understanding into what we already have to be able to automatically understand, categorize, and sort individual documents based on what type of document it is. Is it a contract? Is this a will? Is this a research memo? Is this a court decision? Along with what area of law it's related to or areas of law. We also have a lot of information now on where this technology really excels and what its limitations are. And the limitations are largely on its inability to create new information, which in most other contexts, when we're talking about, ChatGPT, people want a tool to create new information because it's a creative writing tool. That's not valuable in law, and frankly, it's much more liability than I think law firms should be willing to take on because it's effectively work product. But if we're talking about retrieval is about 95% of enterprise use cases when it comes to AI. This is a system that works really, really well. So how do we build a system that does just retrieval for enterprise tasks in a way that's better than just RAG? And the answer is the explainable language models. This is a project that, frankly, Formic has been working on since its original inception. It starts with getting away from using embeddings and a transformer-based architecture to encoding an entire database in a hierarchy of tokens, mapping the relationships between those tokens. And then the hardest part that no one, at least on the public side, has been able to figure out so far is how do we take that deconstructed information and reconstruct that into a natural language response without using those embeddings or a transformer-based architecture. Because the LLM right now does all of that work, but because everything is going into the magic of the embedding, we don't have an explanation really for how it actually constructed that response and what information it actually pulled from. So we spent a lot of time just figuring out the first few steps on how do we want to encode information, how do we want to build this essentially deconstructed knowledge graph for these tokens, and then how do we reverse that process to deterministically construct the natural language response. Well, now we have a working prototype. And the prototype is about 1 million times more efficient on a compute than a large language model. Because of the architecture, it's physically impossible for this model to hallucinate because it can't even produce a word if that word is not already in the database somewhere. It has zero creativity, which again, on the consumer-facing side, people want some creativity. They want it to be able to draft an email or write up first drafts of this paper format. But when we're talking about enterprises taking on liability, you don't want any opportunity to hallucinate. But the real value, at least in my mind, is because it's entirely deterministic. This is effectively a machine more than a thinking model. We're able to record every calculation from prompt all the way through to response and provide our clients with an explainability log for why every word, every character even of its response was used, where it came from, and how it's relevant. That's where I think the most value for us is, and that's where we need to take this technology, I think, to get over the real barrier that I'm seeing, which is LLMs right now in the legal market, and I think this is true of all of them, are positioning themselves as less likely to hallucinate than others, or more legally tuned to specific use cases. But at the end of the day, any client that wants to work with someone like a Spellbook or an Alexi or even like co-counsel, Thomson Reuters, or even Copilot with Microsoft, um, they still have to take on some risk in order to be able to use this technology for work. And the value that they're trying to sell right now is that you're just taking on less risk than if you were to work for someone else. And I don't think that's a sustainable way to grow this market, and it's certainly not a way to build trust in technology from a profession that is notoriously conservative, that is notoriously risk averse, and is notoriously slow on uptake and adoption of new technology. So I think we need to take a new approach to what does it mean to have an AI in law, and the new approach has to understand that less risk is still risk. You need to remove it entirely. You should be able to use this technology in ways that support your work without jeopardizing it.
And Daniel, what's Formic AI's vision for the future? Do you see your technology and similar technologies that are to emerge in the space operating in parallel to what can now be considered a more traditional AI, the likes of CoCounsel, the likes of Harvey, the likes of Alexi, which are taking a similar approach? Or do you see a reality where those are replaced entirely by system like yours?
I have a couple directions that this could go in. And I think the answer to that is somewhere in the middle here. I think there's a huge opportunity, not just in law, but in enterprise scale AI generally, for the explainable language model or XLM and similar uh, types of architecture that'll be developed in the future that are essentially purpose built for enterprise use cases in secure environments with all of these security and reliability features built into it. And the understanding is for the use cases that enterprises are paying top dollar for, these models are the best in the market. But they're not going to write your emails for you. They're not going to write a letter. It's more specialized. I also think that we're going to see a strong shift in the market over the next 18 to 24 months, especially from the conversations I've been having with legal regulators, not just in Canada, but the United States, Europe, all over Asia as well, that LLMs, especially like any company that is using any LLM, whether it's an open source or their own, so long as a risk of hallucination still exists, cannot be used for legal work product. And I think that's going to have a very profound effect on the market as it currently exists, because like what happens to Harvey if the American Bar Association tomorrow decides that they're going to recommend that no company use an LLM for legal research? It goes through the floor. Same thing with Thomson Reuters co-counsel, Lexis Plus AI, VLEX. If the risk of the technology that they built the business on is greater than the value that the technology brings, it's a very conservative profession. And I think we're going to start seeing that migration away from companies using predominantly LLM to these more specialized products or specialized models that don't have those risks and largely offer the same value, accuracy, and reliability. But I do still think there's a place for LLM. The question here is which companies are so close to confidential or privileged information or work product that they have to shift from an LLM to something like XLM or a similar architecture, and which companies have more work to do to find the use cases in law and related fields, frankly, where an LLM does not bring a bunch of risk to it, but at the same time, the value that it adds becomes greater than the risk that you inherit.
And speaking of that, Daniel, it will be great for you to tell our listeners what are the type of legal professionals you are looking to connect with at Future Lawyer Canada in Toronto.
So at the Future Lawyer Canada conference on November 26th, we'll be unveiling our first full prototype of the explainable language models. The kinds of people that I'd be most interested in talking to are the people working at law firms, either senior partners on the practice side or on the technical side, chief technology, chief innovation, chief AI officers that have a strong interest in leveraging this kind of AI technology to support the work that they're doing and to make their practice more capital and time efficient, but are also very cognizant of the risks posed by large language models in those same use cases. Because I want to be able to offer them this middle ground where Formic's technology can offer them that value without them having to take on a bunch of liability in order to be able to give it a shot.
Thank you very much for your time today. Thank you for supporting our brand new Future Lawyer Canada. And we look forward to having you there, but also introducing you to our audience. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you very much, Timo.